Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And welcome back. We are officially entering our first discussion this morning. And as Marlene mentioned prior to the commercial break, it will be a two-part conversation we're about to embark on with the Leader of the Opposition, Honorable John Briceño. Good morning, Mr. Briceño.
Good morning. Good morning to both of you. It's great to see you guys, and I prefer it to be in person, but I did wake up too early. So I had advantages.
There we go. So there are a number of national issues that are pressing as we go into the end of the state of emergency. And I know that you recently stepped down from your seat as a member of the National Oversight Committee. Perhaps that's an ideal place for us to begin our conversation before delving into the other areas of national issues. What, first of all, informed your decision to resign as the co-chair of the NOC?
Well, sure, that's a good question, Isani. But first of all, thanks and good morning to both of you, and good morning to Belize. It's always a privilege to be here and open your eyes.
Sure.
As to the NOC, when the Prime Minister first invited me to join the NOC, I felt it was a privilege and an honor to be able to come together, both the opposition and the government, to work as one. This pandemic was and still continues to be a serious one. But more importantly, back then, when it just started, we knew very little about this virus. People were scared, rightly so. And so were we as leaders in the country. And I felt it was important that we can set politics aside and think about Belize. And for us to be able to see how best we can steer Belize through this pandemic. And it worked fairly well. I mean, the Prime Minister and I, we had some good moments. I know you all will remember us pouring water for one another and everything. That was not for show. It was a genuine effort in assisting one another. But, and earlier, I mean, we were in full consultations most of the time. But after a while, when I think members in government started to feel that we've gone through the worst and that we have now the virus under control. I think there is a feeling now, especially from the cabinet, that constitutionally they are the ones that in effect run things in this country, and that they are the ones that should be making the decisions. And so, a few meetings ago, a little over a month ago, then the Prime Minister came and informed us in cabinet, at the NOC, that we don't have a legal standing, we don't have a legal footing. I know that the members of the cabinet have said that they are the ones that are constitutionally mandated to manage the affairs of the country, and that they are going to be making the decisions. Honestly, it wasn't something that I could have argued because he is right. It's the fact. They run things. And there was certainly no argument from my end. And so then we continued working after that. But more and more, I was realizing that, sometimes we are used to consult. Sometimes they ask us to make decisions. But we were, certainly from my end, I was quickly realizing that the real role of the NOC was no longer there. And then as a member, as a leader of the opposition, then I also have other matters that I have to deal with for my party.
Yeah.
But Martin, it's important to make this very clear. At no time did anybody in my party or that the executive or the parliamentarians pressured me to to resign. It is a decision that I made by myself. When I was accepting to work in the NOC, there were some members that were not too happy about it, but they respected my decision. But
what were some of the objections? Because if you're looking at this from a national non-partisan perspective, what objections or concerns would have been raised by others in your party about you joining forces with the leader of the country?
it was simply politics, Isani. There was no real strong argument, short of we being the opposition, that we should not get entangled with the government. But it was a very, very small minority within the party.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody accepted and supported the decision that I made, because it was a decision that I made as leader of the opposition and leader of the People's United Party. It's not that I went to ask for permission. But at the last executive meeting, I came to the conclusion that it is time for us to move on. We have work to do in the party. We have to get ourselves organized and do other issues, and also to be able to raise concerns as we see them to the government and also to the public.
Were there
Being
any...
a member
Sorry.
NOC, it makes it a bit more difficult.
Yeah. Were there any decisions, naturally, when the public sees your resignation from the NOC, the assumption is that perhaps there was some disagreement in decisions that have been made there. Was that the case?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As I said, I made that decision as the leader of the party that it is time to move on. And then the members of the national executive also agreed with me. Many of them felt that it was already time.
Yeah.
So I think that the timing was right, that we left at the appropriate time, and then that we have other work to do.
That's great that you would punctuate that part of it there, because now there are a number of issues that we can now go into that stem from your resignation, so to speak, that are of national importance, right? We're looking at the economic crisis that the country is presently facing after what would have been the so-called first wave. And we're also looking at a general elections that's, for all intents and purposes, a few months ahead of us, right? So we're looking at also preparing for what could inevitably be a second wave. And that's where all of these changes now come together. Within your party, have you discussed, one, the way forward in terms of the upcoming general elections? And two, if a second wave should happen and your party has taken office, if you're successful at the polls, what happens next? Has there been a projection as to what you will do going forward?
Okay, let me answer two before I answer one. With number two, it has always been, from my perspective, in my mind, and I have discussed it with a few members in our party, that God forbid that another crisis arises and the Prime Minister presently would invite me to join him again, that they believe that they need my assistance and my efforts and my ideas and my work in addressing the crisis, I'll be more than happy to join. I have not said I would never go back to the NOC. If there, God forbid, there is a second wave and one that requires our work, the People's United Party, to work with the government, I wanted to make it clear to all Belizeans, absolutely, yes, we are prepared to work with the government. Should we be the next government, which I hope we will, and again, there's a crisis and we need the opposition then to join us, I would not hesitate to ask whosoever the leader of the opposition at that time to join us, so that we can show people that there's a national effort in addressing this pandemic.
From what I'm hearing from you, Honorable Belizean, it seems to be that you're saying you, as the leader of the opposition, you are satisfied with participating in a bipartisan approach to address the health crisis and the health crisis alone of COVID-19. Is that an accurate interpretation?
Absolutely not. I am saying that I'm prepared to to work with the government to address the COVID-19 crisis. And the COVID-19 crisis, there are different aspects of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of them is health, but the second one is economic.
Yes. And in the interest of moving the conversation forward, we do need to talk about the economic situation. We know that your party has already spoken out about the Treasury notes. And one of the things we seem to consistently hear, especially from the private sector, is the lack of an economic recovery plan. The Treasury notes are for the most part, being well received. At least the idea of it, we don't know how many people are actually going to purchase the notes. But what are your thoughts on the strategy that does exist, or perhaps even the lack of strategy, in terms of economic recovery for the country?
Well, that's precisely one of the reasons I felt that it is time for us to move on, because we believe that we were not being, that the ideas that we were putting forward were not being given the proper attention or seriousness, certainly from not the NOC, but outside of the NOC. For instance, I'll give you a simple example. When this whole pandemic broke out, and then we said that there was going to be a food program, Chris Coy, who represented me on the economic group, and I and some people in the productive sector, we came together and we came up with a plan where we can use $10 million that the government said they're setting aside to feed Belizeans, and worked out a plan where we can go and buy local products, the chicken, the beef, the pork, the rice, the beans, and so forth, and store it in some warehouses, and so that then we can take our local products and give it to our citizens for them to use for food. That plan, that $10 million plan, would have been able to feed 100,000 citizens for 3 months. And when we made that, I wrote a paper, along with Chris Coy, and presented it to the NOC. While the Prime Minister felt that it was not, how could I say, he did not accept it. He did not accept it simply because, I think it was easier, I imagine, or to stores and give a coupon to buy. That was part of the economic recovery, because then we would have been giving money to the farmers, and then the farmers would have then used that to be able to replant, to be able to grow more chickens and more eggs, and more eggs, etc.
And there was an excess of produce in the market.
Yeah.
Precisely, that's the point. We would have bought all that excess, getting it at a lower price, of course, and then use the police and the BDF and members from within the government. We had all these employees that were staying at home. We could have used them to be able to distribute the food to those that need it. That would have been a part of the economic recovery that we were talking about on short term.
Yeah.
So that's one example of a suggestion that was put forward that wasn't necessarily embraced by Cabinet.
Marlene, from our end, that is one of them.
Yeah.
But we are also working on ways of how we can use the banking system. Using we have been very liquid for a very long time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cash within the government, within the banks. And we would have used the cash reserves from the banks to be able to use some of that cash reserves to be able to help small businesses, assisting them with their interest payments, say for the next 6 months, provided that they will keep their employees. And the same thing we have done for the productive sector and other businesses. Again, that is for the short term.
Yeah.
These are just some of the ideas that we are looking at to how we will be able to get the economy going. Of course, we'd have to bring in fresh capital. And that is where we would sit down with World Bank and IDB and CDB and come up with a massive program where we can inject new capital, fresh capital in Belize, and that's the businesses that qualify, because it's not going to be easy free money, but the businesses that qualify, that we then will be able to provide fresh capital for them, low interest rate, and a much longer term payback term. So these are some of the innovative ideas that we were looking at, and how is it that we can get the country through this economic crisis that we are facing.
So was this tabled at the NOC, this particular economic plan?
No, it was not. It was not. Because we felt that we were not getting anywhere. The governments, the public officers did make an economic plan, but I don't think it was really addressing the fundamental problems that we were facing.
So
there is a plan.
We are working on our plan.
No, you said the public officers have made an economic plan.
They made a plan, but I don't think it was something that was really well thought out, and it did not go down well really with the NOC. And whilst we did not rejected it, we just feel that more work has to be done.
Well, can I just, because, and maybe you can give some insight since you have only recently left the Oversight Committee, and I'm assuming that your resignation from the NOC means that your economic advisor is no longer a part of the Economic Council as well?
Yes, we all the party withdrew.
So you've all departed.
For instance, Dr. Daisy Guerra, who is an epidemiologist, who was the co-chair with Judith Alpuche. She also, we withdrew. We're still there to help in any way that we can. But we have all work to do as a party.
Let me ask a follow-up question then. Are you satisfied with where we are thus far in terms of government's response? If you're not satisfied, what can be done to improve the situation as it is, considering the fact that it's a very tough situation that any government would find themselves in?
No, I'm not satisfied. I'm not fully satisfied because there's more things that can be done. I think that where we have failed, the NOC and the government, we have failed in educating people about this virus. Granted, at the start, we knew very little. There's still a lot that we need to learn about how this virus operates, or how it changes over time. But there are certain things that we have learned. And more than anything else, we have to learn to live with the virus. We cannot remain locked down forever. And I know some people don't like to hear this. And even some members in my party were telling me, why are you saying that? Let the blame, leave that to the government. But the truth of the matter is, Sani, is that, and Marlene, is that we have to learn to live with the virus. We can't stay locked up forever. We can't, the most vulnerable group in our society is our elderly people and those that have pre-existing issues, like diabetes and hypertension and asthma. But that's just a little over 1% of our population. What we need to do is to be able to see how we can protect that 1% while we start to work. We have to start to open up the economy. We cannot open our land borders right now because Mexico and Guatemala, they are going through a very serious, their wave is just, they have not peaked. They're just spreading even more. And it's an uncontrolled environment. But we can control the airport. The airport is a controlled environment, and that we should be able to open the airport and then allow some tourists to start to come in to Belize. And I know some people, my sister was one of them, and she's a very intelligent woman. When I brought it up to her, she said, oh my God, we can't do that. But when you explain it to them, and she understood and said, but yeah, you're right. We just can't stay locked up forever.
Well,
How can we? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, Marlene. Look at what other areas, other countries have been doing. First of all, we need to put the proper protocols. Because when they come, they're going to come in maybe 150 or 300 of them at a time and do the proper testing put the tracing up on them, and we only open certain geographic areas of the country. For instance, we could say we will start with Kikaka, San Pedro, and Placencia, and the small resort islands that are out there in the sea, and keep them there so that you know exactly where they are, and you put the contact tracing app on their phone so that we know exactly where they are. So God forbid, should something happen, we know where they are, and then we can go on and interview to get the people that could have or maybe not got
Contact.
I think what you're saying is really critical to the conversation. And my question really is, because we don't hear what the possible plans are. You started off by saying that perhaps where the NOC may have faltered was in educating people about COVID. I would then go on to add to that list that perhaps we were, as the wider public, left unaware of the strategies and plans that were being created. Even in the phases of the lockdown. In fact, some of our Caribbean counterparts had a wonderful communication plan of understanding when you're moving from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. The people knew exactly what to expect and what were expected of them. Similarly, with the reopening of the airport, when we say this statement that we're looking at other countries, it has to be specific, because there are some countries that are just letting in tourists with very little to no restrictions. And there are some countries that are doing a more streamlined process in how they will allow visitors and where they'll allow visitors. Let me just get your direct response. What is your preference and what is your position in terms of the reopening the airport? Is it as soon as possible, as in August 1st?
I presented a paper to the NOC about a month ago, making the case that we need to open the airport by July 1st. And I said that I spoke with the people from the airlines, from the customs, from the airport, from immigration, and they all were already putting the proper protocols as to how we're going to deal with the tourists as they come into the country. Of course, we just can't open it up with no kind of protocols or just open up the doors for anybody to come in. I'm not suggesting that, and we should not do that at this time. Whatever we need to do has to be calculated, and we have to be precise and know exactly what we are doing. Now, Marlene, that is part of where I say we have failed with the communications, because we have not educated the public enough, and we did not come up with a proper, what should I say, as you pointed out, a communications plan. I mean, we had the we had the Attorney General going on TV and just going on and on and on for a full
The commissioner
hour.
says one thing, the Attorney General says another, the police you meet at the checkpoint says another. I mean, there was a lot of lack of clarity. That's what I'm saying. Moving forward, what has been done has been done. There definitely has to be proper communication on any of the changes or expectations or legislations that are put forward. And
Well,
so,
Well, if you were to remember, Marlene, that way back in at the last House meeting, when we had when the government wanted to extend the national state of emergency, we went in saying that we said that we do not think that we needed 60 days. We felt that 30 days, that we were in a position where we seemed to already have controlled the spread of the virus. And then I said in my presentation to the government at that time that let's use that first 30 days to put legislation in place and make whatever amendments we need to do as to how best we can control the virus, because we cannot be in a perpetual state of emergency, a national state of emergency. Of course, the government rejected that, and they wanted their 60 days. Now we got that 60 days but still yet we have not done the necessary work to put the legislation that has to be put in place. For instance, the amendment, for instance, to the Quarantine Act, so that we can manage this. And this is where I was coming from, really.
You clearly state that you have advocated for July 1st reopening. Many will say that's perhaps not feasible at this point, at this 11th hour. So I'd assume that you mean as soon as possible if it's August 1st, August 15th. But let me...
Well, Malay, there is absolutely no reason. Of course, the 1st of July is out of consideration. I mean, it's not way too late. But there's absolutely no reason why we cannot open the airport by the 1st of August. Again, with the proper protocols, testing, requiring that any tourist that comes, they either do their COVID test within 72 hours before they come to Belize, or we do the test here in Belize. The rapid tests that we have, they are getting more and more accurate. I think right now they are over 80% accuracy. And then you have the actual COVID test that takes a bit longer, that is almost 100% accurate, that we can continue to use.
So let me ask a question here, because you know that there is a very heated debate about reopening as soon as possible or waiting until the high season rather than taking the risk. When we talk about the economic situation of the country, there is a lot of hope being placed on what the reopening of the PGIA will do. And very easily we can look at what's happening in the United States. You know, Florida is looking at a spike of cases where a lot of or tourists may come from, or at least pass through. We're also looking at the economic situation there. What type of disposable income do they have to travel? Do they want to travel in COVID times? So it's banking on something that quite clearly there is even more uncertainty as to who will come back. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that it's best that we practice, if you want to use this word, with a small amount of people, so you know you have it right. And if we open up the airport right now, nobody in their right mind expects tens of thousands of people flocking to Belize. We do not that at this time. But what we do expect is that the high-end traveler, the people that have a lot of disposable income, want to come to a country that's COVID-free. And Belize is COVID-free. So those people are prepared to come to Belize. When you talk to some of the hoteliers, they will tell you they already have bookings, that people are just waiting to be able to come to Belize. But they are going to come in a small number that will allow us to be able to make sure that we have everything in place, so that hopefully when we open up for the tourist season come November, we have everything in place. We know exactly what works, what did not work, and how is it that we're going to be able to have our visitors to come, to be able to move safely. And even more important is to be able to keep our citizens safe and away from COVID-19 as best as we possibly can. But the point is, Marlene and Isani, we cannot remain locked up forever. We are facing a serious economic crisis. And more people are just starting to feel the real effects of this economic crisis. The first one to feel it was the government. I mean, their resources just evaporated pretty much overnight. And that now the government now has to go to the central bank and in effect print money to be able to pay government employees. I mean, I just can't imagine what the government was thinking when they stopped the cattle exportation into Guatemala. You might claim that it is informal or formal. As far as I'm concerned, that is irrelevant. That has been taking place for the past 20 years. the officials in Guatemala, including the Minister of Agriculture in Guatemala, was fully aware of what was happening. And we stopped an industry that was bringing in between $40 and $50 million in Belize at a time when we needed most.
Yeah.
We stopped. Yeah. And right now, we have Guatemalan farmers that want to buy our cattle right now. And they don't come to Belize because what we do, we transport it to the border, and then it is BAHA certifies it, and then it goes across the border. So we be finding ways of how we can produce and how we can sell and how we can get this economy moving once again. We cannot continue to pay 17,000 public officers when there is no money and continue to print money. What the government is doing right now, I mean, we are putting at risk even the our dollar against the US dollar. The exchange. We have to produce. We have to work. There's absolutely no way going around that.
So let me pose that question to you, because while I think it's easy for all of us to say, well, we got to do something, because people are losing their jobs, people are earning less, things are getting more challenging, and so as the leader of the opposition, your challenge is to be able to at least give people some kind of insight as to what opportunities do exist, even if it's never acknowledged by the current administration. So we've heard three things so far. We know the Treasury notes as one option of getting some immediate injection of foreign exchange. There is the debate, which will probably be sorted out soon, about reopening the airport for that trickle of foreign exchange coming in there and business. And we know that there is a substantial amount of borrowing that is taking place. Those are the only three options that we have publicly been made aware of. What else, and how would you suggest that we implement to be able to begin, because it's three phases that we're looking at. We're looking at an emergency situation where there are needs that have to be met. Then we have to start to look at recovering while we're meeting those needs. What are your suggestions?
Well, the first thing we should have done from the beginning is we knew that these countries, and Belize did it in 2008, to go for the special drawing rights at the IMF. We can get as much as $30 million. When we were at the NOC, the Prime Minister said that they got an offer of $18.6 million US that was offered by the IMF to Belize. Now, he was talking about waiting for a letter of conditionalities. We never saw the letter, and all he said was that finally, about 3 weeks later, that the conditions that were being placed on him was way too much, and as he quote unquote, there's no force on earth that will have him sign those conditionalities. So that went through the window. So that's the first thing. We have not been focused as to what exactly you want to do.
So you never knew what the conditions were?
No, we did. All he said that that the IMF wanted the government to pass legislation as to how we're going to move the country forward into financial sustainability. More than that, he did not tell us. And he just said no.
Is that too much to ask? Would that have been too much of the IMF to ask?
I don't know, because I did not see what are the conditionalities. So,
okay, so here's my...
But that is one part of it. Secondly, I would immediately allow our farmers to export our beef, our chicken, our eggs into Guatemala. They still want our products. They still need to eat, and we have excess capacity, and we could quickly ramp it up to be able to get.
Let's stick a pin there quickly, and let me go back to the point that you were raising with the IMF. You were saying that $18.6 million was initially being offered to Belize, correct?
That's what the Prime Minister told us at the NOC.
Now there's been an application. As far as my recent conversation with the Financial Secretary, there's been an application for financial relief through the IMF to the sum of about $38 million, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing is, we're now country number 88 waiting in line. Should we have perhaps taken the opportunity when it was being offered at $18.6 million then, as opposed to dealing with the uncertainty of having to wait an inordinately long period of time to get the 38 million when people are being affected on the ground?
Isani, I think we should have been country number 10 because from day one, right at the very beginning, we realized that the money dried up. From the end of March, the signals were there that the money was drying up. So we should have immediately gone to the IMF. We knew that when we shut down that there was no money going to come in. So we should have been number 10. And for us to hear that we're number 80, I think that's unacceptable. And I think that somebody needs to be held accountable. And the only one or responsible for this, and it only could be the government of Belize, in effect, the cabinet, since they claim that they are the one that run things.
All right. What we're going to do, if I could just... Yeah, we do have to take a break, and I think that we're getting into a very meaty conversation here, so I want to take a quick pause, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation about potential for economic recovery, and of course, then we'll talk about politics in a pandemic. That's coming up after the break.
Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And we're back, and we are continuing our conversation with the leader of the People's United Party, Honorable John Briceño. If you missed the first segment, we talked a bit about the resignation from the National Oversight Committee, and we dived into topics like reopening of the airport, and now we continue, or we pick up where we left off from, Honorable Briceño, in talking about economic recovery for Belize. This is, you said it earlier, you said it is an absolute crisis, and one perhaps that we are only just starting to feel the effects of. Before I get you back into the recovery, kind of as a precursor, tell me, what concerns you the most about the state that we're in right now?
I think the biggest problem, the biggest concern that I worry about is the state of the economy. But what is important to point out, Marlene and Isani, is that the economy was already in a bad shape.
Yeah.
If you remember, we were already in recession. Basically, what COVID-19 did is that, remember the story where the emperor has no clothes, where the little girl pointed out and said the king has no clothes. That is what COVID has done to the UDP-run economy. It pointed out that the economy was really bad. It was mismanaged. This government has spent about $12 billion. They have invested $2 billion in infrastructure work, and this pandemic just wiped out all the growth. The economy grew by about $1 billion under the UDP, and now this pandemic just washed that away. So we're back to where we were in 2008 with the state of the economy. They had $500+ million from Petrocaribe. They had over $600 million from the oil money. I mean, there's over $1.1 billion that the UDP got that they could have invested wisely. We were telling them from day one, we needed to come up with an economic plan. They had no economic plan. They refused to invest in the productive sector. Whenever I would bring it up to them, they say, oh, those people have a lot of money. They did not realize or did not understand that really, whilst there are a few big farmers, there are thousands of farmers across this country that are part of the productive sector. So we are in this position. COVID is only showing how bad the economy was. So let's not allow the UDP to say we are in this bad situation because of COVID. No, it is because they have mismanaged this economy since 2008.
Let me
if you look, exports,
but it can't be
our
disputed.
exports are less than they were in 2012.
It can't be disputed, though, the devastating effects that COVID-19 did have when, in March, tourism essentially stopped. And so what we have seen is an explosion in unemployment, people who are seeking benefits either through the unemployment benefits and even through the pantry program. And the numbers alone, we know we're growing. You know, we hear stories every week.
Right.
Yeah.
But Marlene, that's the point. That's the very point I'm making. And you are agreeing with what I'm saying. Because what has happened is that our government has put all their eggs in the tourism basket. So that once tourism disappears, everything is gone. If we should have been investing in the other areas of the economy, once we have gotten a slowdown, it would not have been as severe as to what we are facing right now.
Yeah.
That's the point that we're making. That because they had no economic plan, they just continue putting more and more into tourism, wanting to build. Imagine a road to Caracol, because 10,000 tourists go to are visiting Caracol, and they, according to the Prime Minister, saying that they're going to spend $180 million.
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense.
I think that
I'm
will
glad you
forever
bring up
haunt-
those two
that
situations
will forever
because
haunt him.
the question now is, can some of that money, the exorbitant money being paid for the coastal road, the Caracol road, can those be diverted now at this point for what are clear priorities, which is,
Well,
you know,
what we have said, and we put it and I repeat it again, we have been on record, that the new PUP government will be reviewing all those projects and where we believe that we can divert monies to more like to the productive sector and where it's needed to be able to create employment for people as quickly as possible, we are going to make those changes. So we have alerted everybody. When we even wrote to the British, we wrote to CDB with the loans that they made for the coastal road, and alerted them that something went wrong there, and we are very concerned. So we are going to be looking at all these mega projects that the UDP government have in place, and to make sure that if we can divert this monies to where it is most needed, we are going to do that.
Let me go in a slightly different direction, still within the context of economic recovery. So we're looking at all these measures to come to the assistance of the tourism industry and of course other areas of the public sector, but we don't seem to be addressing the urgent needs of the small and medium businesses who, as you look around, Mr. Briceño, a lot of small businesses won't be recovering from COVID-19. People are shutting down their doors because they can't afford to do business any longer, and there doesn't seem to be any relief package coming their way, either by way of stimulus or otherwise, for them to be able to carry on with their day-to-day business.
Well, I think that is what happens when you have a government that has no plan. They grew in the wrong places. For instance, in 2008, there were approximately 12,000 public officers. At the last count, the Prime Minister announced, I think it's the last budget speech, that there are about 17,000. I mean, so the growth of the public service now sucks a lot of the money and does not allow us to be able to have extra money that we can put in the economy. We have to be creative, as I said. With these small businesses, the government, obviously, there's not enough money to give, but they can be creative. They can be able to divert some of these very same monies from CDB and IDB and so forth, and make it available to provide low-cost, long-term loans just to the small businesses that can still survive, because you don't want to throw good money at bad. So there are some of them, unfortunately, that will not be able to. So to survive, probably they were going wrong from or bad from even before this pandemic. But we need to be creative. And this is what I don't see with the government at this time. They are not being creative. They are just printing money and trying to spend the money. My concern now is that we're moving on to an election, and that the UDP has been a master in using government funds to be able to try to see how they can win an election. And I suspect that they will probably do the very same thing once they raise this $30 million US treasury bill.
Well, I definitely want us to talk about the politics behind some of this a bit later, but let's just go back to some of the suggestions that have been made. You know, Isani asked about small and medium businesses. I think it's a critical point. While we can say there is no, we are not aware of what the plan is or if there's a plan, we know that different sectors have been putting forward recommendations. The BTIA spoke about being able to access long-term, low-interest loans, possibly from some of the money coming in through the IFIs and funneled through DFC. The chamber put together what they called a stabilization plan to be able to talk about some of the very same issues facing small businesses. And they're saying if you offer a subsidy to a small business with the stipulation that you keep your employees, that's less people who will need to get relief under the unemployment program. So the point I'm making, and the question that leads to, is that there are many suggestions that are out there in the wider society and from the individual sectors that are experiencing challenges. Why do you think that we have not heard some of these ideas being put into a formal plan and presented to the people? What's your perspective on this?
Marlene, I think that's a question you need to ask the Prime Minister and not myself. Because he is the one, as the Minister of Finance and as the Prime Minister, that's supposed to be putting, along with his technical team, these plans. We have some plans, and as I mentioned, a few of them, how we can use the excess liquidity in the system to be able to provide low cost and long-term funding for these small businesses. That's pretty much what we've been talking about this for some time. So we do agree with some of what the chamber is talking about. But the best person to answer that question, I think, would be the Prime Minister and his technical people in the Ministry of Finance.
So, in the meantime, the opposition will keep on putting out suggestions with the hope that perhaps some of these may be actually adopted over time?
We are going to continue to have our conversation with the different sectors. Last week, I met with the producers of and the leaders at Blue Creek and talking to them about some of the plans of a new PUP government, how we're going to work closer with them, how is it that we're going to be able to assist them in accessing low-cost funding, opening up markets for them, ensuring that when we produce, for instance, tomatoes in Belize, we are going to eat the tomatoes, we're not going to allow importation. We were talking about them as a plan as to how we can organize the productive sector and to be able to take Belizean products and sell it go from island to island, selling these products without having to go through the United States. We met with the Productive Sector Association, or the Association of Agriculture Producers. I'm trying to remember the right acronym. That's being led by Mr. Canton, Henry Canton. Last year, we were talking, and they were saying if the government can help them in leasing out a 3,000-ton ships, and there are hundreds of them available in the Middle East for a little or no money, and bring them there. We put all our products on the boat, and then we can go from island to island, delivering our products without having to go through the US. These are some of the innovative ideas that we have to put in place, where as a government, we become a partner with the productive sector. They are not our enemies. This government has treated the productive sector as an enemy, because whenever we bring up the idea, they say, oh, they have money. But we're seeing that is not true, and that we need to come in and to help. Imagine, in 2008, and Abimai said it well, we were producing over 8 million boxes of oranges, just like Costa Rica. And now here we are, now fast forward to today. We are producing under 2 million, and Costa Rica is producing 14 million. They have the same problems like us. They have citrus greening, but the government joined the productive sector and worked together to address this crisis.
Well, the politics of citrus is a politics altogether unto itself. And I'm certain that the growers in Costa Rica aren't facing
Isami,
those.
respectfully, nobody's talking about the politics in citrus. That's another matter.
Yeah.
And we have to find how that can be addressed. But the point is, the fact is that right now we're producing less than 2 million boxes of oranges.
That's fair to say, yeah.
We've had Costa Rica now producing over 14 million boxes. We have not been putting our efforts, our attention where it is needed, and that is in the productive sector. The same thing has happened to shrimps, that we have been unable to work with them and see what can be done to be able to assist this industry to be able to continue to export and bring much needed foreign currency in the country.
Well, you know, I think that a lot of what you're saying in terms of...
in the north.
Yeah.
The same thing can be said about our cane farmers in the north, that one of the biggest things that is killing our farmers, apart from the low prices, is the high interest rates at the banks.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to find funding so that then we can lend to the farmers at low interest rates so that they can survive and get into, to be able to be financially viable and to be able to save our small farmers. Because what is happening now is that the bigger farmers, and BSI, ESA, they are getting bigger and bigger and marginalizing our small farmers. We have to make sure that we can protect them also because they do play a very critical role in the economy, also in the society, because they do provide employment for people and provide for their families when they are producing sugarcane, as in the case of the North.
For years, and I can attest to that, I think in many conversations right here on the show, whether it's with people from agriculture, just talking about the economy in general, we spoke about diversification and that there was a lot of risk in putting, in being so reliant on tourism. We're still lucky because other Caribbean countries are only reliant on tourism, and at least we have, yeah. So we weren't that bad, but the point is, in this situation now, it gives you the chance to say, well, I could have, I should have, and I didn't. But moving forward, it really is a time of action rather than just being able to say what we should have done. And so my question is, while I can hear from you clearly, and it seems to be a consensus that in this time, we need to perhaps be strengthening the agricultural sector and ensuring that it's a bit easier to do business, it help them with access to export. But what about new areas, new emerging areas that perhaps Belize could consider, should consider in a time like this where we realize that it'll be a while before we get back to where we were with tourism?
A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with my sons, 3 young men, and I was telling them the future of this country is agriculture and technology. That's the future, and we have it with us. I believe that we need to continue to work with the tourism sector, but we should not allow the tourism sector to continue to be 40% of GDP. We need to increase the other sectors so that then tourism can continue to grow, but can, as the size of GDP, be maybe no more than 20%. That is how then you do the diversification. Yeah. And then you need to look at what we have right now, Marlene. We have agriculture. So we need to work with agriculture first.
Yes.
And we can do some quick wins. For instance, we can open the border right now with Guatemala and allow our cattle and our chicken and eggs and everything that's available.
Open for export, you mean?
Yeah. Please, this is important, Marlene.
No, I'm saying, you're saying open for export.
Of course,
yeah.
For export.
Okay.
For export. That is one thing. Secondly, we need to sit down with both partners, both Guatemala and Mexico. Look at Mexico. We import from Mexico over $200 million a year. I think last year we exported to Mexico about $400,000. We need to sit down with the Mexican government and say, this cannot continue. You have to open our market so that we can produce, so that we can sell some of our products. They want our cattle, they want our beef, they want our pork, they want our shrimp, they want our fish, the tilapia. So we need to be able to, so that they can reduce the tariffs, so that we can be competitive. But we need to be serious about what we are going to do. Yeah. And the same thing goes for Guatemala. and also El Salvador. El Salvador wants to buy all the black beans that we produce, but we are not properly organized. So we have to help them to organize to get going.
Yeah.
Now these are the low fruits, as we call. Then we go to the BPOs, or the call centers, as what everybody would understand.
Yeah.
That if we can target that industry, and government can become partners with these people, with these investors, to ensure that we can reduce the tax that they have to pay. We can ensure that we can reduce the cost of the bandwidth, and that where necessary to make some funding, low-cost funding available from them. When I've been talking to Chris and the research that he has been doing, along with, we have an entire team of economists and business people that are helping us put our plan. We can easily within 5 years, produce between 5 and 10,000 new jobs for Belizeans. And then it's not only about answering the phone, do the phone calls, but we have a lot of young people that are fairly tech savvy and that can learn quickly, so that we can bring in programmers to Belize, whereby we can then teach our Belizeans to do. Probably we could start with the low-end programming, and with time continue to do more high-end programmers. We are pretty much on the same time zone as the United States. We're two hours away. We have a pretty good communication system in Belize between BTL and SpeedNet. So we have it all in our hands.
And we speak
what
English.
we don't have is a government that has a targeted plan, and to be able to put that plan into action. We have the people that can do that. We have people with the experience and people with the ability. It's important to point out, Marlene, that whilst we do that, we are also bringing a lot of young talent to go to Belmopan. Of the 31 of us that are offering ourselves, only 6 of us have been in a cabinet. All the rest are new people with ideas, with the ability to work hard and to be targeted and to get the work done and to turn things around in this country as quickly as we possibly can.
Now, I wanna move on from this topic, and it is the most important topic in terms of the economic situation. But we got to talk politics, because now we are looking at a date for the leadership convention for the United Democratic Party, which is.
Can you hold your I just want to make one more thing clear before we move on to this.
Sure.
The PUP is not a party of the IMF. We do not believe on some of the requirements that the IMF would want us to do. Retrenchment is a UDP word. But we do believe that what the IMF wants is a plan for financial sustainability. And once we have that plan, I am confident that we'll be able to get monies not only from the IMF, but also from the IFIs. So we have that confidence that we'll be able to do that. But with that, we can move on now, Marlene.
No problem.
Well, okay. So let's go back to the politics of the day. There is a scheduled election for the end of November. That's really the end of the term. We know the leadership convention for UDP got pushed back. Now we're hearing it's going to happen in July. Let me just get your sentiments as to how you're feeling about the current political environment.
Honestly, I'm not giving much attention to about who's going to be the new leader of the UDP. I mean, a new leader is going to do nothing for the UDP. They need a complete and total overhaul. I mean, they are running the same ministers. Most of them are running the same corrupt and incompetent ministers that the UDP have. They are the very same faces that are going to be offering themselves to form the new government. So just a new leader as it is not going to solve anything for the UDP. But even with the present sorry lot that they have of running themselves as leaders, I mean, can you imagine John Saliva, again, Mr. Saliva, being the leader of the UDP when he has lied to the Prime Minister, lied to his cabinet colleagues, and lied to this country? Can you imagine that? I mean, I'm told now that Dr. Figueroa has withdrew his name. Mm-hmm. He was smart enough to do that. And as to
so it doesn't
the rest,
matter to you who will be your competitor at the polls?
me, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
So now the question is, what work have you guys been doing? I mean, the general elections is an inevitability. That date will be set sooner or later. So what kind of active work has been done on the ground, notwithstanding the entire COVID experience that we're going through?
We're doing a lot of groundwork. A lot of people get caught up with the splash, with the big noise. But really, to win an election, it requires a lot of hard groundwork, getting your candidates organized, making sure that we have a political machinery ready for whenever they call the election, making sure that we can register our voters. And since January, we have been in January, February, and March, and now started in June, we have been putting more and more emphasis and work in getting our people registered. And of course, now we are preparing our manifesto. We've been doing a lot of consultations with people in industry, in health, in security, etc., to be able to get the best possible minds to come up with the best possible plans to be able to turn this country around.
Do you think your party will be ready for a November election?
Absolutely. We will be ready even before then. That's the kind of confidence and the state of readiness of the PUP. We'll be ready whenever the UDP, the government or the prime minister, because it's the prime minister that calls the election, we are going to be ready whenever he decides to call the election. We believe that the people want change. People want hope. People want an economic plan. And Belizeans want a group of people that are going to be tackling as what they call the 3 C's: job creation, corruption, and crime. And we are putting a solid plan to be able to address these issues.
Now, let me ask I have one final question. I think, how closely are you going to be watching the next few months? Because as an outsider looking in, going into an election cycle, we are very well acquainted with the culture that we have in this country. And the idea of decisions being made about livelihoods, from unemployment to food assistance, to how money is borrowed and how money is spent during an election cycle, just as a regular citizen, it should be concerning. How much is the opposition going to be paying attention? And, do you think that we should have full disclosure on the funds that are coming in and where they're going and how they're allotted?
Campaign financing.
No, not just campaign finance. We're borrowing money for assistance, general assistance.
More than anything else, I think that there has to be full disclosure as to the monies that are coming in and how we're going to use those monies. We have to ensure that money is not being used for electioneering, but to be able to address the necessary or the concerns or the that we have, the issues in health. Just imagine we had some heavy rains a few days ago, and look at what happened to the Western Regional Hospital. The hospital in the nation's capital was leaking and got flooded. How are we going to address these issues? The Prime Minister was talking that he is putting in infrastructure that is going to be here for decades. And the first heavy rains that we had in the beginning of the year washed away parts of the Western Highway or the George Price Highway coming to Belmopan, and from Belmopan to Cayo, and parts of the Hummingbird Highway. In fact, I saw a meme that was very funny that they were referring to Belmopan as the Republic of Belmopan. Funny but sad. The reality is that this government has spent hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in infrastructure work, and we're seeing now that it was poor workmanship, bad planning, set in the wrong places, and now we are left to foot the bill because we will have to fix it. And now the monies that are coming in, this $30 million US that the Prime Minister is attempting to raise with treasury bills, it is of concern Because whilst, yes, we need that US dollars, it could potentially free up more Belize dollars so that they can be using it to win an election. And the danger about that is that the more monies that you have in the system, the more monies that you let go, then there's more demand for products that require US dollars to buy. And so that is also potentially a massive problem that we have in front of us. So I ask that you as journalists, Isani and Marlene, that you all also have to be able to keep the government's feet above the fire, to ensure that monies that are coming in, that they are well spent, that it is not being used for use for electioneering, to help to pay for a UDP campaign, to see how they can try to win another election. It is important, it is monies that we need, but we need to use it in health. We need to use it to be able to help poor people, for those that don't have a job, and to be able to we can help them through this crisis, at the very least, to be able to have some food to give to their families.
No, I agree. I think accountability is key, and I think there's nothing wrong with even asking from now, if there's assistance being given out, who gets the contract for what, and how are they chosen? We don't ask these questions often enough, and sometimes it's important to put them out there. So my question really was about whether or not we'll hear the opposition kind of putting these questions out there as well. And of course, we do have a responsibility to do the same here. But
I was about to say that also, Marlene. It's not just you by yourselves alone. We as the opposition also have legal and moral obligation to ensure that we continuously bring those issues to fore, to the discussion, so that Belizeans can understand what is being done with their monies.
So just final point. What is your message to the Belizean public today? They're watching, they're thinking of, how long am I going to have my job? How much of a salary cut am I going to get? Is my business going to survive this? When are my children going back to school? Am I going to get COVID? Will I die from COVID? Will the health sector be able to manage it? There are a lot of concerns in the country right now. What do you say to the people at a time like this?
I think we need to tell, from our perspective, that there is hope. That once we work together, we can go through this crisis, and that we should not panic. We should not be afraid. That common sense can get us through this. For instance, that we need to continuously wash our hands, that when we go out, let's use our face masks, use the distancing protocols that have been set in place. That can help us to go through this pandemic until they find either a vaccine or a treatment, which I think that they're working feverishly on that internationally. But also, we have to understand that we have to work. There's no easy solution. All of us, we have to roll our sleeves up, and then we have to work with and help one another. We have to start to open up the economy cautiously, and ensure that we have the proper protocols in place to ensure that if there is a flare-up of COVID-19, that we can quickly shut off the area that we need to shut off, so that it does not spread while the rest of the country continues to work. We cannot lock down the entire country. We just can't do that. I mean, we can't afford it. People are going to starve if we do that. So, and also I want to tell Belizeans that we in the PUP, we have a plan. How is it that we're going to get this economy growing? How we're going to be able to address the issues of poverty? How we're going to be able to work with people that need the assistance most? How we're going to expand the productive sector, expand tourism, and expand new areas in the services, like for instance, the offshore financial services that, again, we also have some advantages there, and that we are going to tackle the issue of crime. Crime is has a direct effect because of an economy that is not growing fast enough to create jobs for Belizean people. We are a hopeful people. We are optimistic as a people, and I want to tell the Belizean people that the People's United Party is ready to take on these challenges and to be able to have a Belize that works for everyone. We want to create opportunities not only for the PUPs, but for the UDPs and all the citizens of this country.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having this conversation with us this morning.
Thanks, Melanie. Sally, thank you very much.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. As we spoke about, there are a lot of different impacts from the pandemic. One is definitely we're seeing how people are having mental health issues as a result. We're going to be talking about that after the break with the president of the Mental Health Association. So please stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.